As Kevin has indicated, we are privileged to have our Secretary General who heads the Global Secretariat for our operations in over 75 countries. And as Kevin has intimated, we have so many things we're working on, but at this particular moment, we are glued by a global campaign that is focusing on climate justice, and we have brought in the Secretary General Larok to speak to you based on questions that you will be asking him, and he will be responding, and I will be there to backstop on some elements Zimbabwean, but suffice to say that the conversation is being held in Zimbabwe, but it is regional and global in nature. So thank you so much, Kevin, and thank you so much, Arthur, for making time. And the time is yours, members of the press. Arthur is here to respond to questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My name is Louise. I'd like to introduce that you are launching a global campaign. Maybe to just give us a brief overview of the current situation globally in terms of climate crisis.
Fantastic. That's an important contextual question. I think climate change has been a topic we have debated for a long time. And in many respects, climate change is normal, but the acceleration that we have seen in the last decades is why there is a problem. So scientists have told us that unless we get to zero emissions by 2050, we will have essentially a collapse of our planet, really. And when we talk about collapse of our planet, it's not environment. The world, the earth will always find its balance. It's humanity that is under threat. Now, so all of this is documented, perhaps not as well known in some countries than in others, but the climate crisis is a global burning platform that is perhaps one of the biggest threats to humanity in the world. Now, why is ActionAid interested, and what is the angle? In many respects, people look at the climate crisis as an environmental problem, and it is not. It is a people's problem. It is a human problem. No matter what happens to planet Earth, it will adapt, whether in drought or in floods. The world will adapt, but who is affected? People. So I think we should make sure that the focus is on the impact of the crisis on people. What is likely to be the impact of this crisis if we do not act on it? The UN estimates that up to 200 million people could fall back into poverty in the next 10 years if we do not reverse some of the catastrophes that are happening as a result of climate crisis. Now, why ActionAid is so interested in this is because there is so much injustice in this discourse. And what's the injustice? Those least responsible for creating the crisis are the ones that are going to be most affected. So Africa, Asia, Latin America, who are least responsible for creating the kind of investments that drive greenhouse gas emissions will be the ones most affected. So the floods that we suffered in Zimbabwe and Malawi were not caused by our farmers, were not caused by our practices. Many times people think that this is a problem of smallholder farmers, that we have cut trees and all of that, but the real drivers are outside. So those most affected are least responsible. That's the injustice that ActionAid wants to talk about. So I will explain a little bit the climate justice campaign if you're interested to understand the logic around which it is anchored. But that's, in a nutshell, a response to your macro question that you raised about the crisis itself.
So I want to ask, are there any efforts being made to redirect financial resources from the causes of the climate crisis?
So we launched a report. I think you've all received this on how the finance flows. I think you have received this digitally. We have said in this report that in the last decade, the amount of money that has been invested in climate crisis inducing projects, and we identify the top two in the world are fossil fuels, second is industrial agriculture. These are the top two leaders and drivers of greenhouse gas emissions. The amount of money, my brother, that have been put in projects in these two areas is 20 times higher than money that has been invested to actually adapt and hopefully mitigate the crisis. So 3.2 trillion is what we are talking about, to 3.2 trillion US dollars, okay, over the last decade or so. And you have to divide that by 20 to get the investments that have been put in adaptation in the kinds of areas that we as a global community should be concerned about. So that's the paradox that we are dealing with, and our campaign is hinged on a simple logic that we must shift resources from climate crisis harming investments and put them into alternatives. So to tilt the balance, basically to reverse this logic that I've just said about the 20 times higher, we should shift this way. Then we will have certainty, like scientists have told us, that we will have a chance to save humanity. More than think about saving the world, it is saving humanity. So that's the issue that we need to be focusing on. Yes.
In light of the climate crisis, also, what alternative industry sectors should receive more financial support to address the issues?
Yeah. So first of all, I will respond to that question about the sectors, because we do give some recommendations. But it's very, very important that we remember that fossil fuels, industrial agriculture are part of a system that must change. Okay? It's not just looking at a sector or looking at an intervention. There is a system that must change. And what do we mean systems change? I mean, you've heard this in many places. What drives the world at the moment is a colonial, racist, and patriarchal system that must change. Colonial, in the sense that we all know what colonialism is about extraction. It's about extraction, okay? Exploitation without investment. This is what colonialism did. It extracted resources. And why is it racist? Because some lives are considered more important than others. You see how the world responds to crisis, regardless of where they happen. Okay, one day we are worried about Sudan and Ethiopia. When Ukraine happens, everybody goes there. Why? Because there are not people like me and you in that country. So it's very racist the way development in the world is driven. And why is it patriarchal? Why should we dismantle the patriarchal system? Because the most affected, the most disempowered are women, to be honest. the levers that can tilt the balance for the world to stabilize, for the world to be more inclusive, for the world to be more prosperous. So the systems we design, whether political, economic, and social, are very biased against women. And half of the world is being denied an opportunity to contribute to solutions. This is the patriarchal system that must be dismantled. So always remember that at the end of the day, it is about dismantling system. So systems change is the issue. So which sectors? We talk about, in the context of this flagship report that we launched as part of our global campaign, we talked about more investment in agroecology. What is it? It sounds like a scientific thing. When I joined ActionAid in 2012, I thought, what is this thing? Agroecology. In simple terms, it's really farming systems that are in harmony with Mother Earth. So they are not extractive in the way that you farm and you are exploiting the world without thinking about the future. So agroecology is a very, very important investment in agriculture that is necessary. It's a complete alternative to industrial agriculture that is part and parcel of the problem that we are dealing with. So that's one. In Africa, a huge number of Africans are still living in darkness. The access, I do not know what the access to electricity and power in Zimbabwe looks like, but in my country, huge number of population still use wood as fuel. Okay, we don't have power. And as a result, they cut trees. Because of the pressure also of industrial agriculture, we are destroying our environment. So we must invest in renewable and cleaner energy. It's possible. And we should invest in it in a very inclusive and redistributive way. Because we do not want the same actors who are behind fossil fuels and the inequalities that we see in the world to hijack that green agenda. Okay? That then will continue to perpetuate this colonial system that I talked about. So investments in clean energy is crucial. Countries like Kenya are in many respects leading this. South Africa, there have been some interesting investments, but it needs to be done in a different system. Otherwise, these investments will end up the very skewed way with which we are looking at the main paradigm in the world today. So that's the second area of investment, because then it will ensure that the energy crisis, Africa needs more energy, for sure. So governments will argue, if we have natural resources, why don't you want us to exploit? In any case, Africa's contribution to the greenhouse gas emissions is less than 4% in the world. Why shouldn't we exploit our own resources? They will argue, they will make that argument. But the point is, if the world is moving eventually in the next 10, 20 years away from large-scale fossil fuels, we are going to invest and end up with these stranded assets. You know, where will you sell? In any case, the way the West has developed is a wrong paradigm. It's not healthy for the world. So actually, Africa has an opportunity to make smart, newer investments in areas that will be in harmony with Mother Earth. So I think those are two sectors that are very, very important within the context of the climate discourse that we are having. It doesn't replace human capital development, investments in technology. All of those are important, but I think these two primary ones will be essential for this particular campaign.
I just wanted to ask if ActionAid has maybe interventions in terms of the renewable and cleaner energy in the rural areas. Do you have any projects that are running on?
Yeah. So there are numerous projects, especially, I mean, you can speak about Zim, but agroecology has been something that ActionAid has worked on for a long time, targeting smallholder farmers, and sometimes we say this language is a problem. They are farmers. Okay, they are farmers in rural communities who practice what for a long time a methodology that ActionAid has piloted and developed called climate resilient sustainable agriculture. Okay, this is what happens in different parts of the world where ActionAid does operate. Now, with regards to the clean energy, of course, there are many small projects we have run around the world on solar, for instance, investments, small community projects, transition projects that would ensure our communities are less dependent on cutting trees, deforestation, and all of that. Those kinds of things have been done at community level by ActionAid in numerous countries in Africa and in Asia, but they are not enough. They are not enough. They will not change the system. That is the problem. That's why a transnational campaign such as this becomes very, very important. We can count all these projects that we have done, but we ourselves were the first to admit in 2003 that the world is not going to change because of many projects we implement in communities. The world is going to change when we mobilize people to really, really campaign for systems change. It doesn't mean all these community projects are not important. They're important, but insufficient. That's why the idea of a global campaign becomes very, very crucial. Because this, when Zimbabwe, half of Zimbabwe or half of Nigeria is covered in floods, it's not because women farmers are practicing, are using farming systems that are not in line with what we are talking about. It's because the crisis is being caused elsewhere. So beyond our 3-year, 2-year, 1-year community projects, we really need to rally the world together for a change in the system. Yeah.
So why are fossil fuels and industrial projects thriving despite their significant contribution to climate
Yeah.
change?
Yeah. Again, it's back to the system that perpetuates it. Because those who control the system have decided to have profit over people. It's just money. It's a very high return, sector. If you think about the amount of money that banks and corporates put in these sectors, it has a high return. And it's a highly specialized and monopolized sector. So the quick answer to your question is that the system that we talk about as privileged profit over people. And we need to put people over profit. That's what we need to do. That's why those industries and projects are thriving. Because the people, the guys who own banks, and by the way, we need to realize that there is so much power we have. But where do the banks get money? In Zim. They don't manufacture. They don't manufacture money. They get money from you and I. Yeah? So it's our deposits, our small savings that really give them the big resource base to lend companies that are making these investments. That's why we strongly believe in people power to be able to shape this. So they are thriving because they are big corporates and businesses that are making lots of profit, and therefore they do not want to leave. They do not want to leave this sector unless there is an alternative generated pressure from all over the world for them to make these shifts that are necessary. And you will hear arguments that, oh no, agroecology is for small things, it cannot feed the nation. But we know very well that first of all, 80% of those who practice, smallholder agriculture in many ways are the ones that feed us. Like how many of you just buy industrialized food? Not much. Even if there are industrial investments in Zimbabwe, we don't access it. It's for export usually. It's usually for export because that's where the money is. So unless we redesign that system that puts profit over people, it will be very, very difficult. And we are saying, I think the subsequent reports from the context of Africa will be around making an economic case for agroecology. Because we hear very quickly that no, these are small things. You cannot feed the nation, it cannot feed the world. We need evidence, to be put on the table, because we are also an evidence-based organization that counters this argument. So I think that is the shift that needs to be made. Okay. Good.
So I think thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Arthur, for taking this. I don't know, George,
No, I think the Secretary General has put it across aptly. Maybe just to add on one point, the question that was asked about whether or not ActionAid has renewable energy projects, and the Secretary General did emphasize that for so many years our focus has been the alternative to industrial agriculture, and we've done quite a lot of work on agroecology. Suffice to say also, our interface with renewables is when we also do work on the provision of water in rural areas. We have sunk so many boreholes for use by schools, for use by communities in terms of gardening, and we've made sure that each and every borehole that we sink is solar powered. And we think that's more sustainable. We think that also reduces the labor that women use on manual boreholes, etc. So there's this interconnection beyond renewables itself. So we do not do this to feed the national grid, but in the near future we have identified possibilities around areas where we will be able to collaborate with others in the NGO sector and the government itself in terms of how we can continue to do as the Secretary General said, to ensure that we reduce on the use of that which harms the climate and more towards renewables. So thank you, and on this note, I would also want to thank you for making time, and looking forward to interacting with you a little more. Thank you.
Fantastic.